toyresource.com. Yesterday's toys, today's treasures.
Bandai are the world's third largest toy manufacturer after Hasbro and Mattel, and they are the only one of those three that operate their headquarters in Japan. They specialize in model kits tying in with anime series, Super Sentai action figures, and virtual pets. Twinned with video game company Namco, they preside over a global empire of toys, games, animation, and movies. Bandai started life in 1950 as a company that made little metal cars and rubber swimming rings. In September of that year, they launched their first original product, the Rhythm Ball. In 1955, they instigated a product guarantee system, which at this time was an industry first. This made a powerful statement about quality standards, which is significant even today in a market flooded with cheaply manufactured toys. In 1960, they began selling toys internationally. In 1963, Astro Boy became their first significant TV tie-in toy. Over the next few years, they had hits with their radio-controlled car, their slot racing set, and something called Crazy Foam. In 1967, they scored the Thunderbirds license. In 1973, their Mazinger Z won the grand prize at the 4th International Trade Fair. In 1978, LSI Baseball launched, and would later become their first major electronic gaming success. In 1980, a line of plastic Gundam model kit figures was launched, laying down another industry standard. This was a huge deal, as model kits for fantasy characters have always been more popular in Japan than the West. Mobile Suit Gundam, which began with the Sunrise TV anime series in 1979, centers around giant mechanized suits, a concept that lent itself perfectly to model kits, bridging the divide between robots and vehicles. Over 3.5 decades, there have been dozens of TV series and movies, manga books, and hundreds of model kits and toys, making this one of the most significant licenses for Bandai. As a result, in 1982, Bandai founded a new department to produce animated features and TV. And one of their chief interests from this point on was producing licensed toys of mech suits and robots. In 1983, the Kinnikumen Kinkeshi rubber wrestler capsule figures, based on a manga comic and anime, proved immensely successful. These were later remarketed in the USA as MUSCLE, Muscle, or Millions of Unusual Small Creatures Lurking Everywhere. In 1985, Bandai further utilized this license to put out their first Nintendo NES game as well, selling over 1 million copies of Kinnikumen Muscle Tag Match. Also in 1983, Bandai picked up the Godzilla license, creating multiple series of fighting kaiju over the next 3 decades. You can of course see more about that in our dedicated Godzilla video. In 1986, a rather odd yet popular toy worth mentioning is Nico Nyanbo, literally translated as a cat's hand. It's hard to say what it's meant to do, but I gather it can be used as a back scratcher. In 1987, their first animated feature finally emerged after 5 years in development, Royal Space Force: The Wings of Onimaze. In 1993, Sailor Moon proved a massive hit for girls and boys of all ages. The same year, Power Rangers reinvigorated American interest in the Super Sentai concept, which is to say, humanoid fighting team, piloting big vehicles, which all form into one huge robot, that had originally appealed to them with Voltron. Power Rangers, like Gundam, had immense impact and longevity, and after more than 20 years, the show and toys are still going today, making Power Rangers another cornerstone of Bandai's game plan. In 1994, shortly before Mobile Suit Gundam Wing launched and brought about a renewed interest in the series, its creators Sunrise Studio joined the Bandai Group. In 1995, in collaboration with Apple Computers, Bandai released the Pippin. The plan was to make it an inexpensive computer that worked like a console. Unfortunately, Apple let Bandai, who were inexperienced in computer hardware, do most of the work. In consequence, the controller was uncomfortable, Bandai were the only company making games for it, and at $600 it was far more expensive than the Nintendo 64, the Sega Saturn, or the Sony PlayStation, which were already dominating the market. 100,000 were produced, and a mere 42,000 sold before production was ceased. The Pippin would later place 22nd in PC World's 25 worst tech products of all time. In 1996, Bandai launched the Tamagotchi. There were many bandwagon jumpers in the virtual pet wars of the 90s, but it's largely agreed on that the Tamagotchi brand was the leader of this craze that left school children in trouble trying to feed their squeaking hypothetical creatures in mid-class, and becoming distraught when they died. In fact, stock of Tamagotchi sold out so fast and so thoroughly that Bandai had to issue a second version along with an apology. In the years since, there have been many new upgrades, additions, variations, and rare releases, keeping the toy in vast popularity to this day. In 1997, the Digimon virtual pet was produced, aimed at boys, since the Tamagotchi was considered a girl's toy, despite the fact that I had two. Digimon was positioned as a direct competitor to Pokémon, with tie-in TV series, movies, and manga comics. The focus of these, in contrast to other virtual pets, was the ability to do battle with other Digimon, eventually going to a kind of computerized Valhalla called the Mainframe when they died. In the late 90s, a merger with, at the time, still relatively successful video game hardware manufacturer Sega was mooted, but talks broke down, citing cultural differences. The Namco merger of 2005 would appear to be what Bandai were after. In July 1999, thanks to Gundam Wing, the mech suit model kits topped 300 million in sales. This year also saw the release of Bandai's Wonder Swan, a handheld portable game system built to rival the Neo Geo Pocket and market leader the Game Boy Color. Over the next 4 years it received several hardware revisions, including a color version and a sharper monitor, but ultimately caved in the face of Nintendo's Game Boy Advance. In 2003, Bandai entered into cooperation with Mega Bloks, second only to Lego in the building block market. This paved the way for Mega Block Gundams, Mega Block Ultraman, Mega Block Mask Rider, and Mega Block Power Rangers. And in 2005, they merged with Namco, the video game publishers behind Pac-Man, Tekken, Soul Calibur, and Ridge Racer, to become the Namco Bandai Group. In 2007, they optioned Ben 10, which did gangbusters in the USA, tying in with a major animated series about a chap who can turn into an ever-increasing assortment of awesome aliens. They produced wave after wave of figures in 4-inch and 10-inch scale. This also spawned video games and, as with Power Rangers, all kinds of dress-up and role-playing toys. In 2009, the Tamagotchi id was released in Japan. This was the first customizable version that could be accessed from your cell phone. In 2011, they picked up the Thundercats license, formerly held by LJN. I was a particular fan of the Classics figures, based on the original line, and you can see my Lion-O review on this very site. Today, Bandai remain industry giants, able to make the absolute most out of their popular franchises, without greedily running them into the ground, possibly the most valuable skill set for a company beyond actual innovative creation. They can also afford to make mistakes, back the wrong horse, and try again, something many of the companies we've studied at Action Figure Resource have not had the capacity to recover from. It's been 15 years since the Digimon, which was probably their last hugely popular new toy idea, but as they move forward, focusing on multimedia, gaming, and the potential for toy and online interaction, it's pretty safe to say we're about due another craze. And in the meantime, there's always Gundam.
Oppan Gangnam Style. Gangnam Style. Oppan Gangnam Style. Gangnam Style. Oppan Gangnam Style.
ActionFigureResource.com. Yesterday's toys, today's treasures.